Hi and welcome to this seminar entitled Why on Earth Do You Need HR? My name is Birley, and over the next 20 minutes or so I'm just going to give you an overview as to why churches and charities need to consider HR as part of their operating model. Just firstly a little bit about us. So I'm a co-owner with my wife Nikki of an HR consultancy called Cornerstone Resources. We're based in Manchester, but we serve charities, churches and small businesses across the UK. We've been in HR for approximately 45 years between us, and we are postgrad qualified members of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. So we've got the corporate HR experience, but over the last 3 years we've been tailoring that to meet the needs of churches across a number of denominations, charities, both Christian and non-Christian, and small businesses. We are passionate about people, and we're also passionate about God, and we want to help churches and charities become the best employer that they can, and hopefully we can play part of that process with you. So what we're going to cover today, first of all, why do you need HR? So just a bit of an overview about what HR covers and how it can help your organisation. We'll touch on the legal requirements for employers and specifically focusing on HR policies, what you need and what they are useful for, before talking about coaching, development and growth for your teams. Now, HR is a very wide-ranging topic, and we're not going to cover everything in today's seminar, so we'll also signpost you to further resources on our website which will help you to determine whether you need to bring in specialist HR advice. So why do you need HR? Well, HR is a wide-ranging discipline. It covers the entire employment life cycle, so everything from getting the right people in place at the right time to keeping your people motivated and engaged so that ultimately you get the most out of them. We employ people for a specific purpose to do a job. That's covered in their contract of employment, which I'll come to shortly. And it is important that all charities, all churches are well governed and that they are using their resources wisely. So it is important that when you employ someone, they are given clearly defined objectives and that they are then managed in accordance to what they've been employed to do. Secondly, why you need HR? Well, employment law is a very complex and ever-changing set of affairs which governs all UK employers. So it is important that you have a resource that can help you to navigate employment law. So we can talk today a bit about your essential requirements, but things do crop up from time to time. Unfortunately, we have worked with a lot of churches and charities on performance issues, on misconduct issues, on grievances, and occasionally on redundancy issues, as well as recruitment. So it is important to have your eyes open when it comes to employing people. Sometimes things do happen that require specialist intervention. And the way employment law works in the UK is, especially when disciplining and eventually dismissing people, it's not so much just about having a fair reason to do so, although that is a key part of it, but it's also how you do it. So there is a lot of emphasis on following process, and as well as actually having a fair reason to dismiss someone. Clearly, you have taken your role because you have a vocational desire to do what you have been called to do. And having HR can free up your time. So instead of doing Google searches to try and find information about how you should manage complex HR issues, by engaging an HR consultant, you can free up your time to focus on what you've been called to do and be confident that you are getting the best advice and support for the money that you're spending. And so our motto is we save time, we reduce risk, and we save money. Okay, so moving swiftly on to what are the legal requirements for employers. You can see from this list that there are a number of things that you need to do. Now, some of them are statutory that apply to all organisations, so there's a number of pieces of legislation that cover employers. things like Working Time Regulations, National Minimum Wage, Health and Safety at Work Act, Employment Rights Act and Pensions Act, just to name a few, govern all UK employers. Since April 2020, as a result of the Taylor Review, which started a couple of years before, a piece of legislation came in called the Good Work Plan. And the Good Work Plan was quite a wide-ranging set of recommendations which have been either wholly adopted by the government or in the pipeline. And one of those is that contracts of employment, which you used to have up to 2 months to provide after an employee has started, is now a day one requirement. And there are a number of things that you need to contain within that contract of employment. So if you have either got contracts of employment that are written and available to your staff, or you haven't reviewed them for several years, then chances are they are out of date and they do need updating. So that's something you may want to engage with someone like ourselves to help you with. HR policies, so focusing in on them, why do you need to have them? Well, some policies are a statutory requirement from your first employee, so you should have a discipline policy, you should have a grievance policy, and you should have a health and safety policy. The Charity Commission are very clear on the need for policies and procedures, saying that they should be put into practice, responsive to change, reviewed as necessary and available. And they specifically state that charities should have a code of conduct. So based on what your vision is, what your mission is, there are certain things that you will require of your employees to do at all times when they're representing you as an employer. So they should set out your charity's culture and values and how people in your charity should behave. There are also a lot of legal obligations on charity trustees, or whatever you call your church council, or PCC, etc. You have legal obligations, and they must be assured that all policies, procedures and practice are checked and challenged to ensure that they're fit for purpose. So it's not only a case of having policies, but it's ensuring that you act in accordance with those policies. So what policies are essential? As I've talked about, health and safety is one of the key requirements, and there is a video on CRE TV which you may want to review to make sure that you're complying with health and safety legislation. But as I said, we've talked about welfare, discipline, whistleblowing policies when you've got employees. They are all key and important. We've produced a list here of what we think are the essential ones. So there's things here like data protection. So how are you going to manage your congregation's data, your employees' data, people who visit your website? Where's your privacy statement? How are you going to manage issues as they arise? So how are you going to pay sick pay? Are you just going to pay statutory? Are you going to enhance it? If you are going to enhance it, what are the conditions that employees need to follow to ensure that they get access to that enhanced sick pay? What will you do in terms of statutory leave? So people have the right to maternity leave, parental leave, shared parental leave, etc. How are you going to manage that? What steps do employees need to take to notify you of their intention to take the statutory leave? How will you pay them? The more clarity you can give on these benefits, the better in the long run. One, it helps you to ensure that you are managing things consistently, because that's where a lot of employers trip themselves up. They give an amount to one employee for whatever reason, and they don't replicate it with others. Not necessarily intentionally, maybe they've just forgotten, maybe they think there's specific circumstances that allow them to be more flexible with one employee than another. But having that access to a written policy and sticking to that policy once you've advertised it to your employees is critical. People management is one of the most difficult aspects of running a church or Christian organisation. We find in our experience that church leaders and charity leaders are often passionate about their organisations, what they believe they've been called to do, and they are wholly wrapped up in their vision, the vision that they believe God has downloaded to them to meet their particular needs of the community that they are based in. But that doesn't necessarily get translated down. So you bring new people in, and naturally, because you are so wrapped up in the vision, you may feel that is clearly communicated and that everyone knows what part they need to play to ensure that vision is achieved. But that's not necessarily the case. But there is cause for optimism here. Christian employers aren't alone. An analysis and study by the Chartered Management Institute found that 70% of UK employers provide no training for people managers. So if you are there and you have a team and you haven't had specific training, you're not alone, but there are cost-effective resources out there to ensure that you and any managers that you have in your team can be trained and be much more effective in how they manage people issues. And what about volunteers? Well, we haven't got time to go into a huge amount of detail on volunteers now. This is a whole topic on its own. But some quick tips on what to do when managing volunteers. Naturally, you may want to bring volunteers into your team, your family, but you've got to be aware that there have to be boundaries between employees and volunteers. You support them, you absolutely give them essential training to do the particular task that they are being called to do. So if they need a DBS, you sort the DBS. If they need safeguarding training, you sort safeguarding training, because that's an essential part of their volunteer role with you. However, you can't manage them in the same way as employees. You may want to therefore put a volunteer agreement in place, which clearly defines what they are there to do and that they have no obligation to perform those duties. But if you start blurring the boundaries between volunteers and employees, you risk people thinking that they're employees and potentially bringing a claim to an employment tribunal if you terminate that volunteer agreement. Now, that's not to say you should be worried about it. There are steps that can be put in place to ensure that everyone is very, very clear about what their role is. And the vast majority of volunteers that you will have given up their time, their money, their energy, because they believe in the vision that you have brought in. But it's still good to have things in place to ensure that everyone is very clear about what their role is. Okay, so moving on to what makes a good people manager. Well, we've listed a few key skills there that need to be present in a good people manager in order to get the best out of your team. A recent survey found that the most frustrating characteristic of managers were ones whose expectations aren't clear or who frequently change. So maybe get overexcited about the next new thing and forget what they've already agreed needs to be delivered that year. Now, that doesn't mean things can't change, but you do need to bring clarity to your team. Team who don't have clarity of objectives may be working on the wrong things, or they may not deliver exactly what you require because they are genuinely unclear about what they're there to do. And we found that is actually the primary issue about the effectiveness of charities and churches. It's not that they are necessarily set up incorrectly, but they don't necessarily have their staff and volunteers working on the right things. We all love to follow a clear vision, and this should be the first thing that you work on, whether you're a leader of a church or a leader of a charity. But making sure that the team know what part they play in that vision is also critical. Which brings us on to the thorny issue of managing performance. Now, this is something that some church and charity leaders feel uncomfortable about. But if you don't manage performance, you can often be pouring money into a resource that is not going to deliver what you need it to deliver. So for instance, if you've got a youth leader and you just give them free rein to go and do whatever they want, they don't know what they're supposed to achieve, then how are you going to either, one, ensure that person is doing what you want them to do in terms of engaging with people both inside the church, outside the church? Do they have clear sort of guidance on how they disciple their young people, how they bring them into the main church, how we reach the next generation? And that applies equally to charities. Depending on what your charitable vision is, people need to be aligned to that. But they also need to understand what happens if they either willfully fail to follow a particular objective, or that they aren't skilled or trained to deliver it. What do you do? How do you manage that? And when performance management is done well, it can help to motivate team members. It gives them clarity so everyone understands what's expected of them. And people want to achieve, they want to deliver things that are meaningful. So an objective that is meaningful is a good thing. It also acts as a check to ensure that everyone is making a valuable contribution, as I've mentioned. It helps to develop team members. So if you've got a clear vision of where an employee is going to go to in the future and they've got career goals, you can set meaningful performance objectives that are training them up, not just to deliver their current role, but also future roles, which helps you as you grow as a church or charity. And it also helps the individual to feel empowered, to feel that they're making a difference, and to feel that they're getting somewhere with their own career. It recognises and acknowledges the good work of employees, and it will help you to deliver tasks and projects as well as you need. But also it will spot and help you improve people who are struggling. So some people are struggling just purely because they don't know exactly what's required of them. And by setting those clear objectives, you can help that person to develop themselves. So how do you set goals? Well, there's an acronym that's been around for a long time, which is still relevant today, and that's having SMART objectives. So the specific, so is your goal clear? So to use a church example, grow the youth ministry is not a clear objective, but ensure that churches A, B and C are invited to join youth events by the end of March is better. Is it measurable? Are there some measures that you can put in place to assess whether this goal has been successful or not? Is it achievable? Has everyone agreed on the required course of action? Is it realistic? Have you given them enough time or resources to ensure that employee can meet or deliver the goals? Do they have all the tools, support and training they need to achieve it? Is it dependent on other people doing their part? So are there clear linkages between each employee's objectives? And is it time bound? Have you got a specific date where you need this to be achieved by, so you can see whether it is successful or not? Now those times can change, and these documents, as you produce them throughout the year, they should be living documents, they should be amendable. But you've got to start by giving people the tools to do the job. We recommend no more than 3 to 7 objectives. Any fewer, and it's hard to define what that person is there to actually deliver. Any more, and they're not going to achieve anything because they're probably going to be spread far too thin. And we've just put you through things to think about there. So if they are disabled as defined in the Equality Act 2010, you might need to put adjustments in place to help people achieve. And think goals need to be reviewed regularly. So you need to set time aside. We recommend on a quarterly basis. If you can do more, even better. Where you sit down, you review performance, you review progress against those goals, and you tinker around with them, tweak them, amend them as required. Poor performance. On occasion, people do not perform. That's just the nature of employment. Sometimes people are in the wrong role, or sometimes there are specific reasons why they aren't performing. So maybe something's happening in their personal life that has prevented them from giving their best to you as an employer. And it's important that you manage poor performance fairly and consistently. So that doesn't mean storing up feedback for your next formal review. You tackle issues of underperformance or misconduct as soon as you possibly can after they have happened, to give that person clear understanding and guidance of what they need to do to improve, and ultimately to ensure that you as an employer are getting the best from your performance and from your team's performance. Developing people is key. We're all much more motivated when we know that what we do on a daily basis is valued, and when we feel we're continually learning and growing. So give feedback, positive as well as negative. Give it as soon as you possibly can, and bring it to life. Give specific examples of what people are doing well and what impact it has on you, on the team, on the community that you are supporting. So, what happens when it gets to more challenging times? So say you've given someone feedback, you've helped them to understand what's not going well. What happens if you have to then deal with that more formally? Well, we recommend you put in what's called a performance improvement plan to help people understand what they need to do better, to document what it looks like when it's good, to set some specific times on when that improvement needs to be achieved, and also any particular help, training, support, coaching that they need to make that improvement. By spending the time to define the objectives and the improvements clearly, then you are giving that employee the opportunity to turn performance around and to then have a long and fruitful career with you. They can be challenging, and that's why it's good to have specialist support to ensure that you're doing this well, that it can feel uncomfortable and ultimately can lead to the employee leaving the organisation, whether they choose to go because they realise that actually this is the wrong role for me, or they they basically have to leave because you've followed a disciplinary process clearly and consistently, and ultimately that leads to them leaving the organisation. That might feel very uncomfortable for you, but if you think about someone who is just in the wrong job, then maybe actually, God has something different for them to do, which is aligned to what He has equipped them to do. And actually, by allowing them to see that this is the wrong job, you could be freeing them up to perform a much more engaging role for them that makes them feel like they're coming to life and they're in the right place. And actually following a process such as this has helped them to see that. Whereas if you hadn't and you'd allowed them to continue to underperform in their current role, then they may just continue to do this and feel like they're just wading through treacle and you get nothing and no one's happy. So actually sometimes you need to take these formal steps to help people see what they've been called to do. As I said before, HR is a very wide-ranging topic. We've only skimmed the surface in the last 20 odd minutes, and there is far more that we can do to support you, whether it's around recruitment, whether it's around inducting people and making sure that they're set up for success, whether it's about coaching and mentoring, whether it's about providing pensions and employee benefits for you. We can help you. So for more information, please visit our website at www.cornerstoneresources.co.uk, or drop us an email or give us a call, and we'd be very happy to have an initial 30-minute free consultation with you to see how we could help you and ultimately help you to deliver a more successful vision for your church or charity. So thanks very much for listening. I hope it's been useful for you. And as I say, for more resources, please visit our website. Thanks very much.
Nothing beats sitting on it, hearing it, tasting it, wearing it, handling it, trying it, comparing it.
The copier produces 1,000 copies for £4. The Riso digital printer produces 1,000 copies for £1.20 at 140 pages per minute.
Discussing it.
The interesting thing about this centre is it's a very difficult breed on a very small site.
Buying it. Recommending it. I definitely recommend it.
It's always good to have resources, and this is very resourceful, so it's a great place to be.
Nothing beats being here. Buy your tickets online now. creonline.co.uk/tickets.